I was 17 the first time I was left home alone overnight. My parents had gone to a family wedding out of town, and since I had a big test on Monday, I insisted on staying behind to study. I remember feeling proud, like I was finally old enough to handle the whole house by myself. The evening started out normal. I made myself some ramen, put on music, and sprawled out with my textbooks across the kitchen table. The house was quiet, almost too quiet without my parents, but I figured I'd get used to it. Around 10 p.m., I switched on the TV for background noise while I studied. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The street outside was calm. A few cars rolled by now and then, but mostly it was just crickets and the occasional barking dog. But as midnight crept closer, I started noticing little things, like how the motion sensor light in the backyard kept flicking on. Once, twice, then again a few minutes later. I tried to brush it off. Maybe a raccoon, maybe the wind. But deep down, something about it made my skin crawl. Then came the sound, a soft tap, tap, tap against the glass of the sliding back door. I froze. My first thought was that a tree branch was hitting it, except there weren't any trees close enough. I turned off the TV, holding my breath, straining my ears, and that's when I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching across the gravel outside. I didn't want to look, but my body moved on its own. I pulled back the curtain just an inch. There was a man standing in my backyard. Not a neighbor, not anyone I recognized. Just a man, tall with a hood pulled over his head, standing completely still, staring right at the glass. I stumbled back so fast I nearly tripped over the coffee table. My heart was slamming so hard I thought he might hear it. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. Whispering into the receiver as quietly as I could. While I was on the call with the dispatcher, I heard it again. That tap, tap, tap. Only this time, it was louder, more insistent. He was running his fingernails across the glass door. The operator told me to stay calm, that officers were on their way. But calm wasn't possible when I could hear the man's breathing, heavy, raspy, through the thin layer of glass separating us. Then came the sound that still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. The click of the door handle. He was trying to slide it open. I bolted upstairs, clutching my phone, whispering to the dispatcher where I was hiding. My room had a lock, but it felt paper thin, like it wouldn't hold if he really wanted in. I pushed my dresser in front of the door anyway and crouched down in the corner, trying not to make a sound. The house was silent for a long moment, too silent. Then suddenly, crash. The sound of glass shattering downstairs. He was inside. I couldn't stop shaking. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to muffle my breathing. The dispatcher kept whispering in my ear, "Stay quiet. They're almost there. Stay quiet." And then, I heard him on the stairs. Each step was slow, deliberate. The wood creaked under his weight. My entire body locked up as the sound grew closer. When he reached the top of the stairs, he stopped. I could almost feel him listening. I don't know what gave me away. Maybe the sound of my stifled sobs, maybe just luck. But suddenly the doorknob rattled. Hard. Once. Twice again. Then a deep, guttural laugh. He knew I was in there. I thought it was over for me. But just as the dresser scraped forward an inch under the force of him trying to push in, the wail of sirens cut through the night. The rattling stopped. Heavy footsteps thundered back down the stairs. I heard the front door slam, then the sound of boots pounding across the yard. When the police arrived, the man was gone, vanished into the darkness. They found muddy footprints in the kitchen, shards of glass all over the floor, and smudged handprints on my bedroom door. He had been inches from me. I didn't sleep for weeks after that. Even now, years later, every time I hear a creak on the stairs at night, I freeze, because somewhere out there, that man is still walking free, and I'll never forget the sound of his laugh outside my door. It was one of those nights where the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. My parents had gone out for dinner, leaving me alone with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old house settling. I didn't mind being home alone, usually, but that night, something about the air felt different. Around 9 p.m., the power flickered, plunging the house into darkness for just a second before the lights came back. I brushed it off as nothing, but that's when I noticed it, a sound I had never heard before. A faint metallic clank coming from the basement. At first I thought maybe it was the boiler or pipes, but the sound came again, sharper this time. It was as if someone had dropped a tool on the concrete floor down there. I froze in the living room, staring toward the basement door. The air felt colder now, and despite every instinct telling me to ignore it, I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the door. My hands shook as I turned the knob, and the faint smell of damp earth drifted up from the dark stairs below. Step by step, I descended into the basement, the flashlight beam cutting through the dust-filled air. The noise had stopped. I reached the bottom and scanned the room. Boxes stacked high, the washer and dryer, old holiday decorations. Nothing seemed out of place. I almost convinced myself I was imagining things, until I saw it. In the far corner, behind a stack of boxes, a blanket was spread out on the ground. Next to it, a backpack, and on top of the blanket, a half-eaten sandwich. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had been living in our basement. Suddenly, from behind the boxes, there was movement, slow, deliberate. Then I saw him, a man gaunt and filthy, his eyes hollow and fixed directly on me. He stepped forward, and the beam of my flashlight trembled across his face. He smiled. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the stairs. His voice was low, cracked, and chilling. "Don't tell them I'm here," he whispered. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut and locking it, my chest heaving. I could hear him moving below, pacing, muttering to himself. I grabbed the phone and called the police, whispering frantically into the receiver. Minutes felt like hours. Then as I waited in the dark, I heard the sound that will haunt me forever. The slow, deliberate creak of the basement door unlocking from the inside. I hadn't even realized it, but the lock, it worked from both sides. The door began to open. I pressed myself against the far wall, clutching anything I could use as a weapon. But just as his shadow stretched across the floor, the wail of sirens filled the street. Red and blue lights flickered through the windows, and the man retreated back into the basement. When the police stormed the house, they found him hiding behind the furnace. He had been living there for weeks, maybe months. To this day, I can't sit in that living room without glancing at the basement door, waiting for it to creak open again. It was a Saturday night, and my parents had gone out for dinner, leaving me alone in the house. I wasn't scared at first, just scrolling through my phone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the occasional groan of the old wooden beams. About an hour later, I heard it, a faint dragging sound coming from above me. At first, I thought it was the pipes or maybe a raccoon on the roof, but the sound was too slow, too deliberate, like someone shifting their weight across the floorboards. I froze. The attic. The thing is, our attic doesn't have a proper staircase, just one of those pull-down ladders. I had never once heard movement up there. I muted the TV and listened. My heart thumped in my chest. Another dragging noise, then a sudden knock, like something being dropped. I grabbed a flashlight and crept upstairs. Against my better judgment, I tugged the string to lower the attic ladder. As it unfolded with a loud creak, a rush of cold, stale air spilled out. Shining my light into the darkness, I expected to see boxes, dust, maybe a mouse scurrying. Instead, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A blanket, a pillow, half-eaten food wrappers. Someone had been living in our attic. The dragging sound came again, from the far corner. My beam caught movement, a pale hand pulling back behind a stack of boxes. I stumbled backward, nearly falling off the ladder, slamming it shut. I ran to my room, locked the door, and dialed 911. As I whispered to the dispatcher, the sound of the attic ladder creaking open echoed through the house. Slow, deliberate. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs. I pressed myself against the wall, trying not to breathe. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, but all I could hear was the sound of someone walking down the hallway, just outside my door. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a soft, raspy whisper. "I know you're in there." I almost screamed, but just then, red and blue lights flashed outside. Police stormed in, catching the intruder before he could break into my room. He was filthy, gaunt, and wild-eyed. He'd been living in our attic for weeks without us knowing. And sometimes, I still wake up at night, convinced I can hear the ladder creak open again.